Have you ever felt a quiet rebellion rising inside you, a subtle but undeniable feeling that you can't keep living the same way anymore? It doesn't announce itself with thunder or revelation. It begins softly, like the sound of your soul whispering through the cracks of your perfectly constructed life. One day you wake up and the things that used to excite you now feel hollow. The conversations that once entertained you now sound rehearsed. Even your own smile starts to feel like a mask you can't take off. You look around and realize you've been playing roles written by someone else. Parent, employee, friend, believer, dreamer. But none of them quite fit. It's not depression, it's awakening. The world hasn't changed, but your perception of it has been quietly, mysteriously rewritten. Carl Jung called this moment the confrontation with the self, the instant when the unconscious begins to rise, demanding truth over comfort. It's the soul's rebellion against everything false. The old ways of surviving start to suffocate you, and the invisible threads that tied you to others' expectations begin to snap one by one. You start to notice strange things. You can no longer laugh at small talk. You feel physically drained in places that once energized you. Some relationships feel like heavy coats in the heat of summer, impossible to keep wearing. Your spirit begins to refuse what your mind still tries to justify. And that's when the shedding begins, quietly, relentlessly, without permission. You begin to quit, not out of defiance, but out of evolution. Something ancient inside you is remembering who you were before you learned to perform. But what exactly are we quitting when we awaken? What invisible patterns start dissolving the moment the soul chooses truth over illusion? And why does it hurt so much to let go of the very things that once kept us safe? The answers, Jung discovered, are not just philosophical. They are biological, psychological, and profoundly spiritual. He watched people across the world go through this mysterious transformation. And every time, the same signs appeared, the same quiet unraveling of false identities that marks the beginning of real consciousness. You might already be in it without realizing. The tiredness, the silence, the growing distance between who you are and who you've been pretending to be. Because awakening isn't about becoming more. It's about surrendering what you never were. And it all begins with the first thing your soul refuses to keep feeding on, something so subtle, yet so universal, that almost no one notices when it starts to die. You've probably felt it, that strange pressure in the air before something changes. A sudden heaviness in your chest for no apparent reason, the same numbers repeating wherever you look. A dream so vivid it follows you into the daylight, or a silence that feels full, like the world is holding its breath. You tell yourself it's coincidence, stress, lack of sleep, but deep down you know it's something else, a signal, a whisper, a quiet conversation between your soul and something far greater than you've ever allowed yourself to believe in. Most people ignore it. They keep scrolling, working, performing, pretending. They convince themselves the ache in their heart is normal, just another symptom of modern life. But those who are beginning to awaken feel it differently. The signs don't just appear around them. They appear through them. It starts subtly. You wake up at 3:33 a.m., night after night, feeling as if someone called your name. You think of an old friend seconds before they message you. You feel a sudden pull to visit a place you've never been, only to discover something waiting for you there. A word, an image, a memory that changes everything. And then there are the physical sensations, chills that come from nowhere, a sudden wave of emotion when you hear certain words, the way your body tenses when someone is lying to you. It's as if your nervous system has started speaking a new language. Carl Jung called these synchronicities meaningful coincidences that defy logic but align perfectly with the language of the soul. He believed the outer world begins mirroring your inner transformation long before you consciously understand what's happening. The universe doesn't send random messages. It reflects your evolution. So when your relationships start to shift, when old habits suddenly feel unbearable, when your body rejects what your mind used to crave, it isn't chaos, it's calibration. Your inner frequency is changing, and the world is rearranging itself to match it. But awakening comes with a price. The more you see, the less you can unsee. The more you feel, the harder it becomes to pretend, and that's where the pain begins. Not physical pain, but the ache of shedding your old self while still trying to live in the same world. You begin to notice conversations that once made you laugh now drain you. You stand in a room full of people and feel utterly alone. The music you loved no longer moves you, and silence becomes both your comfort and your torment. There's a strange in-between phase that Jung called the threshold. You're not who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. Everything familiar starts to dissolve, yet nothing new has fully formed. It feels like death, but it's not. It's a sacred dismantling, the breaking of the shell that once kept you safe but now keeps you small. And during this dismantling, the signs intensify. The universe begins speaking louder, through coincidences, strangers, fragments of conversation overheard at just the right time. Through fatigue that forces you to rest, through delays that protect you, through losses that redirect you. Most people call these interruptions. Jung called them guidance, because every obstacle, every closed door, every inexplicable moment of déjà vu is the self, the divine center within you, trying to guide you back to your original path. You're not imagining the shifts, the headaches, the sleepless nights, the sudden bursts of tears, the feeling that time is speeding up or standing still. These are symptoms of awakening, the soul's way of rewiring your perception so you can see what's real beyond the illusion. And in those moments when you feel like breaking, when you question whether you're losing your mind or finding it, that's when transformation is closest. The pain isn't punishment, it's the cracking of the shell around your consciousness. Maybe you felt it too, that invisible hand pulling you away from certain people, certain habits, certain versions of yourself. You resist at first because it feels like loss. But what if it's not loss? What if it's guidance disguised as grief? Because Jung discovered that this mysterious process, the signs, the pain, the unraveling, always leads somewhere sacred. But before you can arrive, you must face the first truth that every awakening soul encounters. The realization that the world you were taught to belong to was never built for who you truly are. The first secret Carl Jung uncovered about spiritual awakening is perhaps the most painful one and the most liberating. It's not about angels whispering in your ear, nor about seeing light during meditation. It's about something far more human, and therefore far more divine. Jung discovered that the first thing every truly awakened soul begins to quit is the hunger for approval. It sounds simple, almost harmless, but this single shift dismantles entire lives. It unravels identities, careers, even families, because the need for approval is the invisible architecture upon which most of us have built our existence. It's the thread that connects every mask we wear, every smile we fake, every choice we make to please others. From the moment we were children, we were taught to perform, smile when they look, speak when spoken to, achieve what makes them proud, hide what makes them uncomfortable. And so, without realizing, we built a self not from truth, but from applause. For Jung, this was not merely psychology, it was spiritual warfare. The ego's addiction to approval, he said, is the last great illusion the soul must confront before freedom. It is the false sun we orbit, believing its light gives us life, until one day we realize it only blinds us from our own. Imagine this: a woman who has spent decades trying to be the perfect daughter, mother, friend. Every word measured, every emotion filtered through the question, will they still love me if I show this part of myself? Then one day, in the middle of a conversation, her body betrays her. Her throat tightens. The sentence she's about to say, a lie she's told 1,000 times, simply won't come out. It's not anxiety. It's her authentic self revolting. The soul has declared a strike. Jung called this moment the revolt of the self against the persona. The persona, our social mask, was created for survival, but as the soul awakens, survival is no longer enough. It wants truth, it wants alignment. And that means the old strategies, pleasing, adapting, performing, begin to poison rather than protect. Many people mistake this rebellion for burnout or depression, but Jung observed that what feels like collapse is often the beginning of authenticity. When you can no longer say yes to what your soul rejects, you are not breaking down, you are breaking free. You begin to notice it everywhere. You sit in a meeting, and the urge to nod along disappears. You try to post something on social media and feel a strange resistance. The likes, the praise, the validation that once gave you a hit of belonging suddenly feel empty. It's as if your spirit has developed an allergy to pretending. One of Jung's patients, a successful lawyer, described it perfectly. He said, "I used to rearrange my entire personality depending on who I was with. Now, when I try, my chest tightens. I can't breathe. My body refuses." Jung smiled and said, "That's the soul reclaiming its oxygen." As you awaken, approval-seeking becomes physically uncomfortable because your nervous system is recalibrating to truth. You are no longer built for falseness. Your body becomes the guardian of your authenticity. It warns you every time you betray yourself. This quitting process is not sudden. It's slow, delicate, almost sacred. First you lose interest in pleasing strangers, then acquaintances, then friends, and finally, at the hardest part, family. Each layer feels like tearing away a piece of your identity, because in a way it is. You're not just quitting behaviors, you're quitting versions of yourself that were designed to be loved. And as they die, grief comes. Not for what you've lost, but for what you never really had, the illusion of belonging. Yet, in this death, something extraordinary is born. Jung called it inner authority. It's the quiet power that emerges when you no longer outsource your worth. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to convince, it simply knows. Imagine a tree whose roots finally reach groundwater. It no longer depends on rain. That's what happens when your sense of worth begins to draw from within instead of from approval. You stop performing and start being. You stop asking, "Do they see me?" and start asking, "Do I see myself clearly?" And as that clarity deepens, something miraculous unfolds. The same people who once controlled your sense of self start losing their power. You can sit across from someone disapproving and feel peace. You can hear criticism and remain unshaken because you no longer exist in their mirror. You exist in your own reflection. But this shift terrifies the ego. It whispers, if you stop seeking approval, no one will love you. Yet what Jung found is the exact opposite. When you quit performing for love, you finally make space for love that's real. Relationships built on approval require masks. Relationships built on truth require presence. That's why genuine awakening often feels like solitude at first. The crowd that cheered your false self goes silent when your true self appears. But their silence is not your loss. It's your liberation. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But to live that privilege, you must let die the parts of you built for applause. And if you've been feeling that subtle exhaustion, that ache to stop pretending, know that you're not failing. You're responding to the same spiritual law that has guided humanity for millennia, authenticity or suffering. When the soul begins to awaken, it will choose authenticity every time, no matter the cost. So breathe. Let yourself shed the masks. Every no to what feels false is a yes to your essence. If these words resonate with you, if you feel the quiet truth of this unfolding within yourself, I invite you to like this video and subscribe, not just to a channel, but to a community of awakening souls, a circle of seekers who are no longer chasing approval, but embodying truth. Together we remember what it means to live from the inside out. Because the moment you stop needing others to tell you who you are, something else, something ancient and divine, begins to whisper your real name. I still remember the exact moment everything began to unravel. It wasn't during meditation or some mystical vision. It happened in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, sitting in my car outside the office, staring blankly at the steering wheel. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of rain and old coffee. I had just received an email, another congratulations for a project well done, and for the first time in my life, it made me feel absolutely nothing. I had spent years chasing that feeling, approval, recognition, the nods, the promotions, the praise. I was good at it, too good. I had learned how to play the role of the perfect version of myself, the one people respected. But as I sat there in that car, I realized something had shifted. The praise that once lifted me now made my stomach turn. I felt physically ill pretending to care. It started to happen everywhere. At dinners with friends, I caught myself smiling when I wanted to cry. At work, I heard my own voice saying things I didn't believe. Even in moments of silence when I tried to pray, I felt like I was performing for God, reciting words I didn't mean, hoping to be seen as worthy. Then, one morning, everything broke. I was on the phone with my mother. She was upset, again, about how I'd chosen to live my life. She said I wasn't the same person anymore, that I'd changed, and for the first time I didn't rush to comfort her. I just listened. My throat tightened, but I didn't interrupt. When she finished, there was a long silence. I remember feeling a tremor in my chest, a strange warmth rising up my spine. My body was trembling, but not from fear. It was as if something inside me, something ancient, was standing up for the first time. And then, without planning it, I said quietly, "Mom, I can't keep being who you want me to be. I don't even know who that is anymore." The line went silent. I could hear her breathing. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "So who are you now?" I couldn't answer. My heart was pounding so loud I thought she could hear it through the phone. I had no words, because I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. It wasn't sadness, not really. It was grief, the kind that comes when you realize you've been living someone else's life. My tears fell onto the wooden floor, darkening it in small, uneven circles. And I remember whispering, "I don't know who I am anymore." But somewhere in that sentence, something inside me whispered back, "Good, now we can begin." Over the next few weeks, I felt like I was dying, and in a way, I was. The parts of me built on approval, image, and performance were collapsing. I stopped saying yes automatically. I stopped answering messages that made my chest tighten. I stopped pretending to laugh when conversations felt fake. It was terrifying. People noticed. Some drifted away, others confronted me, angry that I was no longer who I used to be. But in the quiet that followed, I began to notice the world differently. Colors seemed deeper. Time slowed. I could hear my own breath again, and it felt sacred. I started walking without my phone, sitting by the river near my home, watching the light dance on the water. For the first time in years, I wasn't performing for the universe. I was participating in it. One afternoon, while walking through a park, I met an older man feeding pigeons. He smiled at me. Not the kind of smile that expects one back, but one that simply was. We talked for hours. His name was Elias. He told me he used to be a professor, but after losing his wife, he sold everything and began living simply, teaching meditation to children for free. When I asked him why, he said, I got tired of proving I existed, so I decided to live instead. That sentence hit me like lightning. It was the same truth Jung had written about, the quiet power of authenticity, the liberation that comes not from adding more, but from releasing everything false. Elias had no need for approval, no hunger for validation. His presence alone felt like peace. That day I realized something profound. Spiritual awakening isn't about becoming enlightened. It's about becoming real. And reality is not sterile or perfect. It trembles, it bleeds, it breathes. Since then, I've learned to honor the silence inside me, the one that no longer begs to be filled with noise or praise. When I'm alone, I no longer feel lonely. I feel whole. When someone disagrees with me, I listen without the need to defend myself. When I create, I do it because it wants to exist, not because I want to be seen. It hasn't been easy. Some days I still reach for the mask out of habit. But the difference now is that I can feel it. My body reminds me instantly. It tightens, it rejects, it whispers, "This isn't you." And so I pause, breathe, and return. Every person on the spiritual path will reach this threshold, the moment when the performance collapses and the truth demands to live through you. It's frightening, yes, but also miraculous. Because on the other side of that fear lies the kind of peace that no external approval can ever provide. And maybe you've felt it too. Maybe you've had a dream, a sign, or a quiet knowing that something in your life is asking to fall away. Maybe your soul has been whispering, "Enough." If this story resonates with you, I'd love for you to share it. Tell me in the comments below what you felt, what signs have followed you, what masks your spirit is trying to remove. I read each one carefully, and in our next videos, I'll share some of your experiences, because someone somewhere might need to hear your story to find the courage to face their own. Because what if the pain you're feeling right now isn't punishment but initiation? What if your soul is not breaking, but breaking free? The second secret Jung uncovered about awakening is deceptively simple, yet it rearranges your entire relationship with yourself and the world. He called it the release of specialness. At first glance, it doesn't sound dangerous. In fact, in today's culture, we're told that being special is everything, that our uniqueness defines our worth. From childhood, we're rewarded for standing out, for being better, faster, smarter, more talented than others. Even on the spiritual path, this conditioning follows us. We want to be the most awakened, the most conscious, the one who has seen what others haven't. But Jung observed something profoundly different in those who reached genuine spiritual maturity. He noticed that the people who appeared the most awakened didn't feel special at all. In fact, they radiated humility, peace, and an almost childlike simplicity. Their uniqueness was undeniable, yet they never needed to prove it. That's because true awakening dissolves the illusion of comparison. When you awaken, you realize there is no hierarchy in consciousness. Every soul is both student and teacher, sinner and saint, seed and soil. You stop needing to shine brighter than others because you finally see that everyone is the light. One of Jung's patients described this transformation perfectly. He was a man known for his spiritual depth. He led meditation groups, spoke in philosophical terms, and people admired him for his wisdom. Yet behind the image, he felt suffocated by his own persona. "I didn't even realize it," he told Jung. "I was using spirituality to be special, which is the opposite of being spiritual." That confession hit Jung deeply. He realized that spiritual inflation, the ego's tendency to turn enlightenment into an identity, was one of the greatest traps on the path. The ego doesn't die when we awaken. It simply changes clothes. It takes off the business suit and puts on robes. It stops saying, "I'm richer than you," and starts saying, "I'm more evolved than you." But genuine awakening, what Jung called individuation without inflation, is different. It's the process of becoming fully yourself without the need for anyone to notice. So how do you recognize this second sign in your own life? You'll notice it the moment you stop performing your growth. You no longer need to announce your realizations, to convince others, to prove your high vibration. You no longer crave to be seen as conscious, you simply are. And it's quiet. So quiet, it's almost invisible. You stop broadcasting your healing and start living it. You stop using spiritual language as armor. You stop trying to teach everyone and begin to listen again. And slowly, the endless pressure to be extraordinary dissolves, replaced by something far more powerful: authenticity. Jung often said that the most extraordinary thing a person could become was a completely ordinary human being, because ordinariness, when infused with presence, becomes sacred. Washing dishes becomes prayer, walking becomes meditation, listening becomes communion. That's the paradox. The more spiritually developed you become, the less you need to look special. The more awakened you are, the more invisible your ego becomes. A practical technique: the mirror of humility. Here's a simple reflection you can practice today to recognize whether this second sign, the release of specialness, is unfolding in you. Notice your impulse to be seen. Throughout your day, catch yourself in small moments when you want others to notice your goodness, your effort, your wisdom. It could be something as subtle as mentioning your meditation routine, or as small as hoping someone praises your calmness. Pause and breathe. In that instant, don't judge the impulse, just breathe into it. Feel the subtle tension in your chest or your stomach. That's the ego asking for fuel. Ask this question: would I still do this if no one ever knew? If the answer is yes, your action is aligned with truth. If the answer is no, your soul is inviting you to release another layer of performance. Practice sacred anonymity. Do one good thing each day that no one knows about. Help a stranger without credit. Pray for someone silently. Create something beautiful and tell no one. The ego hates this, but the soul thrives on it. Jung believed that humility wasn't weakness. It was the natural fragrance of truth. He said, "Where wisdom grows, pride fades." When you begin to live from this space, you feel lighter. The need to be someone fades, and what remains is pure being. It's like a flower blooming in an empty field. It doesn't bloom to be admired. It blooms because blooming is its nature. That's what your soul wants: to live without the burden of performance. When you release the need to be special, something incredible happens. You become truly unique, not performatively, but naturally. You start to express your essence effortlessly. Your laughter, your presence, your silence, all become extensions of your authenticity. You realize that your value doesn't increase with visibility. It deepens with sincerity. You stop needing to be seen as extraordinary because you're too busy living your truth. And when this happens, the world around you shifts. People feel peace in your presence, not because you're enlightened, but because you're real. Children smile at you for no reason. Strangers trust you instantly. You radiate something beyond personality, what Jung called self, the divine center within every human being. This is the great paradox of awakening. When you stop trying to be special, you finally become irreplaceable. If this resonates with you, if you're beginning to feel the gentle pull away from performance and toward peace, take a moment to honor it. Like this video and subscribe to join this community of awakening souls. We are a circle of quiet seekers, each learning to walk the path of truth without noise, because there is a deeper signal still, a hidden pattern that only reveals itself when the illusions of approval and specialness have dissolved. Jung called it the secret beneath the secret. And once you see it, nothing about your perception of happiness or even reality itself will ever be the same. There comes a moment in every awakening journey when silence becomes louder than words. A moment when everything you thought you knew about God, the world, yourself, begins to dissolve. It's not chaos, it's revelation. Carl Jung called this the night sea journey, the descent into the depths of the unconscious where the soul confronts the ultimate illusion, the belief that it is separate from the divine. This is the third and deepest sign of spiritual transformation, the surrender of control, the sacred death of certainty. Up until now, you've been slowly shedding layers: approval, specialness, performance. But beneath all of those lies the mind's final defense, the desperate need to understand, to label, to control. The mind clings to knowledge like a raft in an infinite ocean. Yet awakening asks you to let go, to drift into mystery. At first it feels like drowning. You lose the ground beneath your feet. You pray, but your prayers echo back in silence. You search for meaning, but every answer dissolves the moment you touch it. You're left naked before the unknown, terrified and trembling. But this is the doorway. This is where the soul stops trying to grasp God and starts to become God in awareness, not in arrogance, but in remembrance. Jung saw this in his patients, moments when logic broke apart and something higher emerged. People who'd spent their lives worshipping the intellect suddenly found peace in not knowing. They began to understand that truth isn't an equation, it's an experience. He wrote, "The psyche is not in me, I am in the psyche." In that single phrase, he revealed the secret mystics have whispered for millennia. You are not a being inside the universe. The universe lives inside you. Look around. The stars, the trees, the people you meet. They're not outside you. They're reflections of the same consciousness, observing through countless eyes. The kingdom of heaven isn't above or beyond. It's unfolding right here, through your perception. That's why, when you awaken, coincidences intensify, emotions deepen, and everything starts to feel sacred. You begin to see that nothing is random. Every person you meet, every loss, every moment of silence is divinely orchestrated for your evolution. The universe isn't testing you, it's teaching you to see yourself through its infinite mirror. It's what Christ meant when he said, "The kingdom of God is within you." It's what quantum physicists hint at when they speak of the observer collapsing reality through perception. The external world isn't fixed. It responds to the state of your inner being. You are both the dream and the dreamer, both the light and the vessel through which the light moves. And that realization changes everything. You no longer beg life to make sense. You no longer chase signs. You become one. You no longer ask God to show up. You begin to recognize him in everything. The pain that once felt meaningless starts to shimmer with purpose. The emptiness that terrified you begins to reveal itself as fullness. The darkness you feared turns out to be the womb of creation, where all light is born. This is what Jung described as individuation, but ancient mystics called it something older, the union of opposites. It's the marriage of heaven and earth, spirit and flesh, light and shadow. It's the moment the divine remembers itself through you. But here's the paradox. Before this union, there must be a crucifixion. The self you thought you were, the one built on certainty and control, must die. Not physically, but symbolically. Every false identity must dissolve so that only truth remains. And that process feels like breaking. Your plans fall apart, your beliefs crumble, your prayers stop working the way they used to. Yet underneath the ashes, something eternal stirs, the quiet knowing that you were never separate from the source at all. So if you've been feeling lost, confused, or emptied out, take a breath. You're not being abandoned, you are being refined. The fire isn't here to destroy you, it's here to reveal what cannot burn, because on the other side of surrender lies peace so vast it cannot be spoken. It's not the peace of safety or certainty. It's the peace that comes from realizing you were never in danger because you were never truly alone. When Jung went through his own awakening, he wrote that he felt as if the floor of the world had vanished. But instead of panic, he found grace. In that void, he discovered the living presence of something greater, a consciousness that breathed through everything. He realized that the divine doesn't demand belief, it invites participation. You don't find God by seeking, you awaken God by seeing. And that's what this community, this circle of seekers, is built upon. We don't chase enlightenment for fame or fortune. We share these revelations because they matter. Because someone, somewhere, might be one breath away from giving up. And a single spark of truth can reignite their soul. So if these words have touched something inside you, take a moment, not for me, but for the message itself, to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Every single gesture of support strengthens this movement of awakening souls. This isn't about algorithms, it's about energy. Each new member adds light to this growing field of consciousness we're creating together. Because we are not just viewers, we are participants in something sacred. We are remembering who we are, and yet there is one more secret, the one Jung never fully wrote about, but only hinted at. A truth so profound that it dissolves the very idea of separation, time, or even death. It's the final revelation that every mystic, every prophet, every awakened soul has encountered. The moment when the divine no longer feels distant, but unmistakably alive within you. And when that happens, the story of awakening no longer belongs to anyone, it becomes life itself. When the storm of awakening finally settles, something miraculous begins to emerge from the silence. A new kind of vision. Not one that sees the world as it appears, but as it truly is. Every sound, every face, every sunrise feels infused with divine intelligence, as if creation itself is whispering, "You've remembered." You start to realize that the signs were never random. The sleepless nights, the inexplicable tears, the endings that broke you. They were all sacred invitations. Each pain was a coded message from your higher self saying, "It's time. Time to awaken. Time to stop living borrowed truths. Time to see the divine not as something distant, but as something pulsing through your veins." Carl Jung spent his life mapping this process, the slow, painful, beautiful dismantling of illusion that gives birth to consciousness. He discovered that every spiritual journey, no matter how unique, follows the same hidden rhythm: destruction, surrender, rebirth. The masks fall, the ego resists, the soul insists. And then, one day, the struggle ends, not because you've escaped the world, but because you've fallen in love with it in a new way. You begin to see God not only in sacred places, but in the eyes of strangers, in the rustling of leaves, in the quiet between your own breaths. You see that every person you meet is part of the same divine play, each one carrying a fragment of the truth you came here to remember. This is the ultimate revelation. Awakening is not about ascending above life, it's about descending fully into it. It's about finding holiness in the ordinary. It's about loving without needing to own, serving without needing to prove, existing without needing to perform. And when that realization anchors in your heart, something inside you softens. You no longer chase miracles. You start living as one. You no longer beg the universe for signs. You realize you are the sign, a walking prayer, a living reminder that light can inhabit human form. Think about it. Maybe your entire life has been orchestrated for this very moment. Every loss carved the space for compassion. Every rejection built the muscle of self-trust. Every silence taught you how to listen to the voice beneath thought. You were never being punished. You were being prepared. And now, here you are, awake enough to recognize the pattern, aware enough to feel that subtle, sacred pulse within your chest that says, there's more. Because awakening doesn't end in understanding. It begins there. It begins when you start embodying what you've learned, when you bring presence into your smallest actions, when you speak with truth, walk with humility, and love without agenda. This is how the awakened change the world, not by preaching, but by being. By living proof that peace is not a destination, but a frequency we can anchor wherever we stand. So take a breath right now. Feel the weight of everything you've been through, not as a burden, but as sacred preparation. You've walked through the valley of confusion and reached the quiet truth at the center. You were never lost. You were being led home. And as you step into this new chapter of your journey, remember, awakening isn't a solitary path. It's a collective rising. Every soul that opens its eyes helps others remember how to see. That's why this community exists, a circle of light where we remind one another who we really are. If this message has spoken to your heart, if you felt the resonance of truth somewhere deep within you, I invite you, join our community. Take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and become part of this growing field of souls who are ready to live awake. And please, leave a comment below with your name and city, because in the next video, I want to honor you personally to send a blessing from my heart to yours. Let the world see how far this circle of consciousness reaches, from city to city, heart to heart, soul to soul. Because what we are building here is more than a channel. It's a movement, a remembrance, a sanctuary for those who refuse to sleep through their own lives. The ancient texts said it long before Jung, "Awake, O sleeper, and the light of Christ will shine upon you." That light is not coming from the sky. It's rising from within you. So let this be your reminder. You were never meant to chase the light. You were meant to become it. And maybe, just maybe, the real question isn't whether you're ready to awaken, but whether the world is ready for what happens when you finally do.